Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show.
I'm back with the amazing Tamara Patzer, and she's someone who can really help you get out there if you are interested in writing a book or getting known and getting yourself recognized by who counts, and that's important in this day and age. And when we left, we were talking about the fact that you can buy your way into the New York Times bestseller list. It may be expensive, but it can be done. But Tammy, there are also people I know who have big followings, and they will actually buy 100,000 copies of their own book to send to their clientele, so to speak. Or they'll buy 100,000 copies and say, we will, you can get the book free as a person who's a member of our tribe, just pay for shipping and handling. And this way, they do have some out-of-pocket costs, but they take care of the postage, the mailing, the shipping, all of that. So there's lots of different ways that you can buy a substantial number of books. And I think in some cases, publishers even require that you buy a certain number of books in order for them to publish your book. Is that true?
Some of them do, and I've seen those marketing campaigns where they are saying, I'll give you the book, all you do is pay shipping and handling. And normally that shipping and handling cost actually does cover the cost of the book, because of course they're buying it at that wholesale level, not at the retail level. But that is one way to get a bestseller. The thing about an Amazon bestseller, because a lot of people, they go, oh, it's so easy. And I have to disagree. Yes, it's not as hard to become an Amazon bestseller, but you do have to do the research and make sure that you put your book into the proper categories, because I look at it as, is this legitimate or is this fake? And if your book is in basket weaving and your book is about marketing, well, unless you're marketing basket weaving, that is not the right category. So I'm really careful when I do my category research. I look at all of the categories that the book should be in. And then I, calculate, okay, which categories. And Amazon allows you to be in 10 categories at a time, and of course, international. So you can actually be a bestseller in 10 categories around the globe. And if you leverage that authority later, because Amazon now puts a really pretty little ribbon on it that says that it's a bestseller. And then if it's a brand new book, you can actually become a hot new release. And that's another category. And I look at all of this from a marketing perspective. It's not about selling a bunch of books, but it's about how can we use the status of being an international best-selling author in order to market ourselves so that we can have more impact, more influence, and more income. Because if you look at it, impact's great, influence is great, but it's all about show me the money, income. And the way I see it is, if I can leverage this, then my clients can actually command higher fees when they do go sell a product or their service. Many of them are coaches. So you look at that, how do I make myself become the only choice in the sea of all the possibilities? And I call that blue ocean authority, because that is when people, again, they see you everywhere and they're like, oh my goodness, that person is the person who knows that. Hey, they even wrote a book on it. So there's a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right with what you're saying. However, this brings me to the point of what is the biggest mistake people make when they're using a book for marketing? I'm sure they're doing things that they, or not doing things that they should do.
I'd say the biggest mistake is actually they don't start marketing soon enough with their book. I have seen so many people, they're going to write a book. Well, depending on, it could take a year before you get that book out done, or it could be, a couple months. I mean, I'm not talking about the write my book in a weekend situation, but people generally, they don't start talking about their book soon enough. They wait till it's published. Well, now they've lost months, weeks, or months. If you start talking about the fact you're writing a book, it's going to actually help you to get that book done faster. But you can say, my forthcoming book. They think they have to have the book in hand or completed before they start to use it as a marketing tool. So that's a mistake, because the truth is, once you say, hey, I'm going to write a book and publish it, now you have a forthcoming book, and you can start telling in your pitches to podcasts or TV or radio, or in your press releases, you're the author of the forthcoming book. I just found one of mine. I'm writing a book called Authority Wheel. And I said, oh, I haven't written that yet, but that sounds like a really good title. And my intention was to write about the authority wheel, which includes, a book and getting on podcasts and writing your blog and making videos. So, there's a wheel that you can actually visualize of how to grow that authority footprint and that platform that everybody is seeking so that they can elevate their status. So I just think that all of this, you have to start talking about it. And again, my forthcoming book, it's as simple as that.
Well, it's interesting. So how long would you say before your book actually comes out? How far ahead should you start your marketing?
I would say as soon as possible. Again, most people, they wait until a couple weeks before the book comes out. Let's say that you're going to have a book come out in 2020, December of 2020. I'll just use that as a date. You should be talking about it now, because there's all of these things that you need to do. For example, let's say that you wanted to get a big name to write a foreword for your book. Well, you need to have something for that person to look at so they could write a foreword. You want to get something out for people to see so that they could start writing reviews about your book, or talking about your book in a positive way so that you could put it into your book when it's published. So the sooner you start talking about it, the better. So I would say a minimum of a year. Now, with that said, if you were actually working with a traditional publisher, it would probably be 18 months to 2 years before your book would ever get published. So, I would say the sooner the better. And with that said, let's say that you're writing a simple book that it isn't going to take a year. And you only have 3 months. 90 days is better than 30 days. 180 days is better than 2 weeks. But start marketing your book as soon as it becomes tangible in your head, I guess is a good answer.
Wow, that's really interesting, because I would never have thought about a year ahead. I can see 90 days, maybe even 120, but a year, wow, that's a whole other thought process. Now, another thing that people think, and boy, I can't wait to hear your answer on this, is they think they're going to become rich from writing a book. What do you have to say about that?
I kind of laugh. It's not funny, but again, we all have these fantasies. It was like J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. Well, those are novels, and those were turned into.
Even with J.K. Rowling, how many rejections did she have? And even like with Chicken Soup with a Soul, they had 100 publishers turn them down. So I mean, yeah. Go ahead. I had to put that in there.
Again, if you think about it, okay, so it's like what I tell my clients and customers is I say, you're not going to get rich selling a bunch of books. So you're not going to get rich with 99 cents a book or selling a book for $25, because after on Amazon, they have a 70% royalty and they have a 35% royalty. But the reality is, you have to sell an awful lot of books to make even $100. However, that doesn't mean that you can't get rich using your book. And I think that's the difference.
You're right.
For example, my first book I wrote it in 2011. It was called Ask TAMI, 365 Social Media Tips, Tricks, and Tools. I have probably sold 50 copies of that book. However, I have made maybe $500,000 because of that book. And the reason I say that is because I used that book to leverage me as the expert in social media. And I got on television, I spoke on podcasts, and I also spoke a lot at Small Business Administration events, SCORE events, colleges. And one lunch and learn I did turned in to a massive contract with Florida Gulf Coast University, because the director of community education was in the audience. My book was up on the stand. I did a short lunch and learn talk. He came up to me and said, would you like to do some classes for Florida Gulf Coast University? And of course, I'm like, sure. I ended up creating the very first social media certification program for Florida Gulf Coast University that they sold. And then I did several years of other courses for them. And later I actually did a training program where I had more than 1,000 people go through my social media training program in an online course. So I would say, no, you're not going to make a bunch of money selling books. However, you can do quite well using your book as a tool if you understand that the slight difference there, because if you are known as the expert, the authority, you actually get chosen to speak on stages, you get chosen to do joint ventures, you get chosen to create things for universities, if that's where your background lies. So I just think books are one of the most powerful ways for you to help you to get your big message out and to move your big mission forward.
Well, I'll tell you, that all goes back to you should have a marketing plan. In other words, no, your book is not going to get you tons of dollars, but it is going to get you tons of visibility if you do it right. And that visibility is going to get you where you need to go if you have a plan. Now, are there things that pop up and opportunities that will present itself and give you things that you haven't even thought of? Yeah, of course. But you have to have a basic plan to get going, and you need to be able to look at something and say, "Oh, now I just want to write a book." No, but what do you want to do with that book, I think is very important. Now, Tammy, we talked about, everybody has a book inside them, but that doesn't mean that everybody can write a book. And of course, there is a new philosophy that if you don't want to write the book, talk the book into an audio device and then have it transcribed, and then you can edit it from there. But what do you do with people who just don't write well or don't want to speak into a tape of some sort? Do you have ghostwriters? Do you have people who assist? What do you do there?
So the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. There's a lot of ways that you can get your information out of you. And you just said it. You said, yes, you can sit down in front of your computer and type away, like the traditional method. You can set up your audio. I know lots of people who have written their books literally by talking into their phone and recording it and getting it transcribed. One of my favorite ways to do a book, and it's how I did my Women Innovators books, are conversations. And that is where somebody interviews you and you have a conversation, and then that's transcribed, lightly edited, and that can actually become a book or chapters in a book. As long as you tell your readers that what they're reading, it's fine. Or you can be interviewed. And I have like a formula where you were probably interviewed over the course of 7 hours, 1 hour at a time, based on what we're trying to attempt to do. And then a ghostwriter would actually write the story for you, and then you would approve it. So there's a lot of ways that you can write a book. And again, it all goes back to what type of book are you trying to write or become the author of? I guess, the term write may not be the correct word, but what type of author are you trying to become? And what is your end result? What is the reason why you're going to create a book? And for example, my Ask the Expert books, it's a formula. I mean, if you watch the Hallmark Channel, for example, and you say, gee, isn't that the same movie except with different actors and a different location, storyline?
I have to laugh because Hallmark is one of my favorite channels. But
Oh,
you're
me
right,
too.
there's a formula. And they never get to kiss the first time. There's always some kind of interruption that prevents them from kissing when they get to kiss the first time. But at the end of the movie, they always kiss. It's a formula. You're right.
Right. And that's exactly how some of these books are created. It's a simple formula. And like I said earlier, that frequently asked question and should ask question, I actually learned that formula from Mike Koenigs. He's a marketer, and I actually learned from him way back in 2009. And I loved that formula so much that was how I actually started my speaking on the stage career. Was I became a Main Street Marketing Machines hero because it was like I said, oh, I use your formula, and then I, made money using it. And so when you sent in your check to prove that you were a success story, you got to be on his stage. And so that was actually my very first paid speaking event. Was I think he paid everybody like $1,600, and then we got to speak for 15 minutes on his stage about our success story. So that was actually how I did that. But really, those frequently asked questions and the should ask questions make a really good Ask the Expert subject matter type book that can help you to really position yourself as the authority and that expert.
It's interesting because I guess most people don't realize that when it says, let's say the Big White Duck by Jane Doe with John Smith, that John Smith is actually the author. And
Yeah.
that Jane Doe, it might have been her idea and it might have been her concept, but in reality, the other person wrote the book, which is why there's a lot of famous people, and it always says with so-and-so because it's the with so-and-so that actually wrote the book. So that's something that people need to be aware of. Now, let's get into a little bit about TAMI, though, because, this is for women 50 plus, and this is, to show you that life doesn't end when you get to be 50. So what are some of the other dimensions of TAMI's life? What else do you like to do, and what else are you involved with?
Oh my goodness. Yes, and I am actually proudly 61, and 61 has been like a really good year. And one of the reasons is because I've gotten to travel, and I love to travel. And I went to India in April, and then I was in Alaska in July. So let's just say, talk about contrast. But I that's on something I've always wanted to do. And because I was a single mom and single grandma, I literally just started traveling maybe in the last 5 years when I, actually been able to start traveling. And so I like to travel and I love photography. In my former life, I was a newspaper editor, and I actually was on the team. It was a Pulitzer nominated team for coverage of Hurricane Charlie, because that came through, and I lucked out by living 12 miles from the epicenter of that. So, we were running around, covering the devastation on that. And I also did a lot of community journalism. So I'm very much very pro journalists in terms of I know how hard I worked to be somebody who was very ethical and truthful to tell all the sides of a story, because in community journalism, you're always working on helping your readers to understand what they need to know so they can make good decisions at a local level. So I'm very anti-fake news. That bothers me a lot to hear that said about journalists, because I am a former journalist, and you know, journalists on a whole are very ethical. So I'm very pro media literacy, and I taught mass communications at University of South Florida for more than 10 years. And I was one of those people who, I live in Inglewood, which is 80 miles from the university. So I was driving up and down the freeway sometimes 3 times a week to teach classes, because as a journalist, I left journalism and tried to become a college professor as an adjunct. And that's a whole nother story that where you try to put enough classes together to make a full-time living, but you're basically making the same amount of money as a graduate assistant would without the benefit of tuition. So it was very difficult, but
I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there, Tammy, because we've only got 2 minutes left. And I have to tell you, one of my former teachers, and when I used to have my modeling schools, lives in Englewood. So I'm well familiar with where you are. Yeah. But anyway, let's tell our people who are listening how to get in touch with you in case they want to find you. I don't know if you have a free gift for anybody, but if you do, that's okay too. So let's tell them, where can they find Tammy?
Well, the easiest thing to do is type my name into a text, TAMI, to 64600. That's TAMI 64600. And when you get there, there's a little place that says work with Tammy, and you can just write me a note. And I do have a free gift that I think people would really appreciate. And it's my roadmap on how to take it beyond the bestseller. And it's useful not only for somebody who's writing a book, but for anyone who's trying to figure out what they can do to create this huge authority footprint. And it's 9 steps and I called it to win the race. And the race is for reach, authority, credibility, celebrity, and expert status. And so they can just type in TAMI to 64600 and talk to me. And of course, they can find me on social media like Facebook. You can friend me, and it's Tamara, Tamara Patzer, and just say, hey, I heard you talking with Gayle, and I would love to just have a conversation if you'd reach out. And I'll answer any questions that you may have.
That sounds great. And Patzer is Patzer.
Yes, Z like zebra.
So, Tammy, thanks so much for being with us today. You've been a wealth of information. I've loved talking with you. And hopefully some of the people will go there and find out, because I know those of you listening, you do have a book inside you. So take advantage of what Tammy has to offer, and, take advantage and be who you can be after the age of 50. Thanks so much, Tammy, for being with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hi, this is Dr. Gayle, and I wanted you to know I have a whole bunch of other things to offer you. If you go to spunkyoldbroad.com, you will see an array of SOB stuff for sale and all our latest products and additions. If you're interested in getting on TV, I have a brand new course, Get on TV. And if you want to start your own business, you'll want my SOB Guide to Business Success. I know you'll love them all. I guarantee it.